French is notorious for having tons of silent letters, but people do not talk enough about the fact that they have two different silent H's. And I don't mean two H's like one is pronounced and one is silent, like in English. No, I mean two different silent H's, but one is more silent than the other. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, French does this thing called liaison, which means that those silent letters at the ends of words become pronounced again when they come before vowels. So this word, for example, is pronounced le in isolation and before consonants. But before vowels, the silent S is pronounced like a Z sound. So you'd have examples like les frères, but les amis. And there's plenty of other examples with other consonants too. Now here's where the two H's come in, H aspiré and H muet, which translate to aspirated H and mute H. Now both of these H's are silent. The H sound is never pronounced in standard French, but H aspiré is treated like any other consonant, so it blocks liaison. This, for example, is pronounced les hautes. But H muet is so silent, it's as if it doesn't even exist at all. Not only can liaison pass right through it, like in les hautes, but you can also form contractions where you otherwise wouldn't unless there was a vowel. So how on earth did French end up with two different silent H's? Well, it all goes back to Latin, which had an H sound, but sometime during the evolution from Latin to Old French, the H sound disappeared and fell silent. So H was always silent leading up to Old French. But then came the Franks, speaking Frankish, a Germanic language that has the sound H. Now Frankish would end up having a huge impact on the French language, notably in vocabulary, where French would end up borrowing hundreds of words from Frankish that start with the letter H. So Old French ended up with two different H's, the mute H's from Latin, which had long gone silent, and the aspirated H's, which were all borrowed from Frankish. Now as Old French develops into early modern French, liaison begins to develop. And since the two H's are pronounced differently, they react to the development of liaison differently. H muet is completely silent, and it's indistinguishable from words without it. So of course liaison develops right through it. But H aspiré was still being pronounced, so it blocked liaison just like any other consonant. In fact, it's only over the past few hundred years or so that H aspiré went silent, in most dialects, but some French dialects still pronounce it. Now you might be wondering, well, how do you know if a word has H aspiré or H muet? Well, generally speaking, words of Latin and Greek origin will have H muet, versus words of Germanic origin, or from onomatopoeia, will have H aspiré. But there's a couple of problems with this strategy. For one, it requires you to know the language of origin of any new word you come across, which is pretty unreasonable, unless you're some sort of etymology nerd. And two, even if you are, well, there's plenty of exceptions. So, truth be told, you just have to memorize which words have H aspiré and which words have H muet. So, dear Académie Française, I generally am not a big fan of you, but the one thing I think you do right is spelling reforms. So why on earth has this not been fixed yet? This is easily the worst aspect of French spelling, and that is saying something.